finally, a CPU worth talking about. This is AMD's new 9800X 3D, and as someone who is currently using the 7800X 3D and was previously using the 5800X 3D, this is something I was really excited to check out. There's just something about 8 cores, 16 threads in a low power format with a bunch of L3 cache stacked on top, which makes so much sense. Not only that, but whenever these CPUs come out, they always top the charts when it comes to gaming. Apparently, giving those CPU cores a lot of low latency memory access on the fly makes a really big difference. So what's new? What do you need to know? Well, it's still 8 cores, 16 threads with a mountain of L3 cache and with a TDP of 120 watts. It's also still made for the AM5 socket, so B650 and X670 boards will be fine with a simple BIOS update. You also have the new X870 boards as an option too, and you'll be looking at AM5 and AM4 CPU coolers. The upgrades here are the new Zen 5 silicon, which should yield around a 15% gain clock for clock versus Zen 4, and also the new location of the L3 cache on the physical chip. Previously, with these X3D chips, the extra cache was actually stacked on top of the CPU cores, but here they're stacked underneath. So AMD says that now that the CPU cores are a lot more kind of directly in contact with the CPU heat spreaders, they're more thermally efficient, which means that they can squeeze extra clock performance out of them. That does seem to be the case, but you'll still take a clock speed deficit versus the standard 8-core model. Quick look at the test bench here. I've tested with 6000 MHz CL32 memory and an RTX 4090 for the gaming tests, and I've also used Windows 11 24H2. In Cinebench running on a single thread, exactly 19 points separate each of the X3D generations. So yeah, pretty respectable gains here. Pretty much every workload out there scales well with increased single-threaded performance, so 17% gain here is very welcome. That carries into multi-threaded as well. This isn't a workstation chip by any means, but it's no slouch either. Here's where it gets interesting though. Despite AMD giving the new 9800X 3D the same 120 watt TDP as the previous one, the power draw is significantly higher at full load, roughly a 60 watt increase, which is really massive. So yeah, that makes things look a little bit less impressive here, especially when you calculate the performance per watt in Cinebench. It's actually worse on the new chip. Despite the new Zen 5 architecture, of course, being more energy efficient, the 9800X 3D runs significantly higher clocks, which need much higher voltages, which makes it significantly less energy efficient. Although the temperatures are about the same. The new core placement and heat spreader efficiency on the 9800 is definitely working. Temperatures in your monitoring software won't be that different compared to the 7800X 3D, but there will be more heat dumped into your PC case, your room, or your water cooling loop, which I think is what most people care about. But yeah, no surprises here looking at production workloads. It's new silicon, the clock speeds are ramped up more than before. There are some pretty nice gains. A lot of my own workloads are really heavy on single-threaded sequential performance, so I'm glad to see some really nice gains there too. Now when it comes to gaming, AMD said that you can expect anywhere from 0 to up to like 20% versus the 7800X 3D, and that's pretty much what I found as well. Assetto Corsa Competizione, which is one of the most accurate racing sims out there, I tested this racing against 25 AIs, and the gains are extreme. 24% versus the 7800X 3D, and 66% versus the 14900K while pulling around 60 watts less. The 3D V-cache in this game makes a monster difference. Even the 5800X 3D is beating the 9950X. Also, quick side note, I was testing the Ultra 9 285K from Intel for this round of benchmarks, but that thing gave me the biggest migraine. I got so many inconsistent results with that thing. I would just recommend staying as far as possible away from the new Intel series, if I'm being honest. The 9800X 3D though, it's definitely a new name for the top of the charts, especially for the right game. And although at full load there's like a 60 watt increase versus the 7800, it's more like 15 to 25 watts when it comes to gaming, which is not bad at all. That actually puts it back in line with the 5800X 3D, which is perfectly fine. In some games though, the performance gains aren't much at all. Still technically the fastest possible gaming chip out there with the least amount of GPU bottlenecking, usually some gains for the 1% lows as well, but if it's not a sim or if it doesn't involve a lot of NPCs or AIs, there might not be much of a difference versus the 7800X 3D or even the 5800X 3D. In Cyberpunk, for example, I've tested at 1440p high settings with a 4090, and if we take a look at the GPU usage, most most of the bottlenecking at this point is gone. Nvidia's Reflex low latency mode is enabled here by default, which means that at the most we'll see around 98% GPU usage. Even if there was a faster CPU here, it wouldn't be adding much at all. But yeah, if you're on something like a Ryzen 5 3600 or maybe even a 5600X and you want to jump to a new platform, maybe you've got the itch just to build something new, now would be a great time to do so. I've got a lot of confidence in the AM5 platform, apart from sometimes with fresh installs you need to boot with a single memory DIMM. Apart from that, it is rock solid. This is also still definitely something that you could confidently pair with a low profile CPU cooler like a Noctua L12S or something even smaller. Safe to say, I'll be using this in a lot of builds to come. This actually launches tomorrow at $480 US, which is interesting because the 7800X3D should definitely still be considered. In most games, under most realistic settings, there's not going to be a massive difference between them. So yeah, definitely keep that one on your radar as well. Otherwise, if you just want the fastest option possible, the least amount of GPU bottlenecking, maybe you're trying to max out a racing sim, for example, the 9800X3D is unbeatable.